It's like they say about Paducah, Kentucky. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And if you are not already in the Facebook group, you should pop in because we are going to be announcing all the winners of the drawings. We've got a stack of Starbucks cards. We've got whiskey glasses. So Here's My Story whiskey glasses and a couple other little surprises. So those will all be announced and published in the Facebook group. If not today, then tomorrow. I finally got around to doing all the drawings, and I ended up having so many things that I'm not going to announce them here, but I'm just going to post them in the Facebook group because those are the people who are eligible. So
that's exactly
all right. If you have not jumped in, you can find that at sohere'smystory.com. There are links. You can also get there from our Facebook page. So off to the story. It's a good one. I'm excited.
Here we go. So here's my story. As you know, had to go through, and I'm still going through, a very difficult period with my mother, who is in her 80s and has gotten into a number of accidents, fortunately minor.
Or driving.
But driving accidents. Fortunately minor. But the last one wound up totaling her car. And it was an older car, but still totaling her car. And we had a conversation, and this goes back a while ago, where I said that I was not going to buy her another car.
Right.
And I wasn't going to pay for the car insurance. And unfortunately...
Which, if I had to guess, has less to do with the car and the car insurance as it is just the awareness of it's time.
It's time.
Yeah. Oh, God, I so dread this.
And I was... and my concern is... obvious, not only for her safety, but if, God forbid, something happened to somebody else on the road, and that family looked at our family and said, "Did you know, and what did you do?"
Right. Yeah. No.
So I made that decision, and quite candidly, I have a great relationship with my mother, and yet that is something which she's said quite frequently that it's something that she will never forgive me for.
Yeah. I don't imagine I will go gently into that good night. I mean, I can imagine. I remember what happened with my grandmother. For her, it was just this complete loss of freedom.
This was
20 years ago. But
complete loss of freedom. My mother is a very intelligent, independent person, and still lives on her own. And yes, so I was taking her freedom, even though I've said, look, I've set up an account. Call this driver, I pay for it. Call Uber, it's my account, I pay for it.
Yeah.
So there are other solutions, which means that she doesn't have to check in with me or whatever when she wants to go somewhere.
Whereas my poor grandmother, every time she wanted to run to the store, had to call someone to take her or do anything. Someone had to take her, which was hard.
That's the point. My mother doesn't have to call the family to ask a favor, but she does have to call somebody. She can't go downstairs, get into her car in the parking lot and leave. Right. She has to call the driver. She has to arrange for Uber or whatever. Anyway, so she is very angry and resentful about the freedom being taken from her. And the reason that I'm mentioning this on what is a business podcast, as opposed to just some sort of cathartic exercise.
But also that
is because I was speaking with a friend of mine, and we're all of the same age, which means that many of us are going through the same situation. And he went through it with his father, and his father was elated by this. Not elated by...
What? By having his... Wait, okay.
No, not elated by the fact that, it's time to take the car away. There's a little twinge about that. But what my friend proposed were the exact solutions I did. Look, Dad, I will... here's the driver that I've lined up. Here's an account. I pay for it. All you have to do is call... in 20 minutes, half an hour, they'll be there. And then you can take them wherever you want to go. You want to go grocery shopping. You want to go out with your friends, whatever you want to do. That's fine. Here's the Uber account. It's all set up in my name. Press the app. You know how to do that. Go wherever you want to go. I'm not trying to take your freedom. I just want to get you there safely.
Same set of solutions to the same problem.
Exactly. Father was elated. And here's why. I was asking my friend, I was like, how did you achieve this Jedi mind trick? And he said, well, it's really, my dad ran his own company for years. And he always attributed his success as a CEO, as a business owner, to identifying what he's good at and outsourcing other stuff. And so what his father had taken into his mind that I don't really like driving. And apparently I'm not really all that good at it anymore.
Which probably made it stressful.
Yeah. And I do get nervous driving at night, but I do, look, especially now in the winter, when the sun starts to go down at 4:30, I want to meet my friends for dinner. It's dark and I don't want to do that. Hey, I can outsource. Now I have a guy and I can just call and that guy or that woman will take care of the things that I don't want to do and I'm not good at. And so my mother sees that as something taken from her.
Yes.
And his father sees it as something he offloaded.
This is so fascinating. And just, I don't want to go down this path, but just interestingly to add like another layer to the Jedi mind trick weirdness of it, in my peer group, my insight group that I run about a year ago, we had a long involved conversation with, and it was so funny how much like mental garbagey nonsense came up. One of my clients had identified that he really needed to get a driver, or I won't even say needed to, but he really, and this guy's like 38, maybe 42. I don't know exactly. But he had identified that driving was taking up a ton of his time. He is a very well-compensated, high-level advisor to people for things. And he was spending a lot of time driving to these clients or driving to these things. And he thought, if I did this, if I had a driver, I could work while I'm in the car. I could get this done. Had an enormous time getting over the sort of bougie,
there's a lot of baggage there.
Like he literally couldn't say it without using a I have a driver tone of voice. And he's still to this day is kind of embarrassed that he has a driver, but it has made a massive difference in his life, but it took getting over that mindset of it. So different kind of thing than having it take away from you, all around this like seemingly silly concept of who's driving you around and is it the highest and best use of your time?
Right. And the shoulds. There's so much baggage there. I'm 38. I should be driving myself. Only pretentious Thurston Howell the third.
Exactly. I mean, who has a driver?
Or, in my mother's case, look, I'm an independent woman. I should be driving myself. And you lose sight of the purpose of this task, which you can accomplish in a number of different ways. But there's only one way I should do it.
So it's really funny. This is not a tangent. It's just sort of a different way it shows up. Why I'm defending that, I don't know. I can talk to you about whatever I want.
I have my own microphone and you're not taking it.
Well, I mean, you could, but I don't recommend it. So I had a client recently who I think has, it's taken me a while to kind of like pick a way to get down to what's at the bottom of a challenge that we've been having. And at the end of the day, I think it's actually not an unsimilar thing. While he has run like larger things and whatnot, I think at the end of the day, he's still somehow in his brain. This is why it took us a while. He doesn't feel like everything is his job to do, which is why it took me a while to get there. Because he has lots of people who do things. And so he's not stuck in that like, oh, if I'm not doing it, then it's not happening. Yeah. So tons of delegation. But I finally put my finger on the pulse of it a couple weeks ago, that he feels like he has to know, these aren't quite the right words, that he has to know first, that he has to figure out the solution and then delegate, that he has to figure out.
Yeah. He has to give precise marching orders or something.
Kind of. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but this awareness of, I want to go back to like how you decide to swallow a thing, or how you decide like what pair of glasses you put on to look at it. And I don't even feel like, so much of it is informed by life experience and the stories you've already told yourself about your value and your worth and your importance of your independence and how much experience you've had delegating. But there still is a choice. Actually, it's not even about the choice. It's before you even get to the choice. It's just the awareness that the exact same movie can play with all the same components and it can feel two completely different ways.
Yeah. And obviously here it did feel different. And I think that it's in part because of what my mother in this story brought to the whole situation, because she might have been telling herself a story that my independence is being chipped away and I'm not able to do X, Y, and Z. And now they're taking this.
Yeah.
So this could have hit a final straw, just like in a business. if you're aware that this employee you're working with has had 4 other projects taken from her, or has perceived at least that a project that she would have been tapped for, somebody else was tapped for.
Right.
And so her role might have been pared down. And so now when you're proposing a different solution or outsourcing that makes total and complete sense, she's looking at it through a lens of deprivation, loss of control, demotion, loss of self, or some sort of ego hit, and it's very different. And to me, I think that what I wish I had realized was that there was a lens through which she could have looked at it.
Here's my curious part, though. Can you control influence? I don't know the right word there. How she sees it. Yes, you could have said, hey, Mom, you can delegate driving. And I don't know that actually, it feels like that is something that is so deeply rooted in your own stories and experience. You can absolutely shift it for yourself. But I think there's a limit to how much. I mean, as somebody who watches other people parallel park their car metaphorically all day long, I just have a really healthy respect for how much people are, like how much of a perspective shift can happen in any given moment. It just feels like a huge leap from I've been removed of my, especially, I mean, she has literally carved a room of I will never forgive you when that happens. Like she was ready to move into that room 10 years ago.
Right. But here's the thing. So if I know about my mother that she believes that if her friends of the same age, many of them arrive at their birthday dinner in their own cars, she feels less than.
Yeah.
But if I had located a service and gotten the mindset where she's not less than, she's arriving with her driver. And I mean, that's not necessarily Uber, but it's a step up in a driving service so that my son paid for a driver.
Right. Do you think that would have worked for her?
There's a way. I could see, well, it's like they say about Paducah, Kentucky. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here. I can.
Specifically Paducah, Kentucky.
Paducah, Kentucky.
Okay.
I don't know if I could have gotten there, but I can see that solution for her because, and this is the point that actually gets back to just a number of solutions that I've seen businesses face. I didn't really look at it holistically on what would appeal to her and the manner of presentation, because I was just practical. Driving is a task.
Right.
It has a purpose. It has a desired outcome. I can get you that desired outcome a number of different ways. End of story.
Right.
And I didn't stop to look at all of the ramifications in her life and what she would bring to that conversation.
Right. Because let's pretend that both your mother and this other guy's dad worked for you in a department. The part that not that we skipped over it, but that's important to acknowledge is your awareness as the head of that department or whatever, about how each of those people feel about driving. Because that part, yes, there's a mindset thing here. Yes, there's a choice about how you decide to look at a thing that's happening to you and whether you look at it as a victim or whether you look at it as, you have agency over your own life. But there's also just sort of the preference and joy. Like I really like driving. I actually enjoy the act of driving. So yes, trust me, I am all about delegation in my life. I will delegate anything. I have a way to delegate it, but I enjoy the act of, it's like if somebody said, oh, I found a way you could delegate your podcast. I'm like, no. I love my podcast. So that you have to recognize that and know that creates how much you can do. But interestingly, as you were talking, it occurred to me, another thing that I think is often useful in navigating trickier situations with people is to disconnect, I would say moments in time, but disconnect things. They don't all have to come together. For instance, if long before or some amount of time before she was having something taken away from her, if you had introduced this concept of like, oh, here's a driver and it's already available to you, and she started choosing to use it of her own volition while she still had a car. Like, for instance, you talk about the evening things. If in the evening she's like, it might be a little bit icy and I don't want to be anxious about that, so I'm going to take the car. And so that the car was already a thing that isn't suddenly now being trying to introduced with a spin that you're like, you're trying to spin me on the car thing, Elliot. Like don't try and put lipstick on it so that I think it's cute. So I think that's another way to, and I want to pause there for just a second because it a little bit sounds like we're talking about manipulating people. And I always draw a really harsh, stark line at that if you get anywhere near something like that. I think the place we're talking more on is just recognizing the importance of how people see things and what they value.
Yeah.
And how can you line things up with that?
Well, I think you have to meet people where they are.
Yes.
So another thing that I could have done is I could have taken the focus off of what was being taken. So I could have said, look, and if there's no insurance payment, you're not paying for gas and all that stuff, why don't we just take that in your budget and I can add to it, and then we'll go to New York, or we'll go this, or we'll build something in, and this saving will allow you to do X.
Yep.
And I could have worked to not fill that exact hole, you know, or that's missing, although, you know, you have Uber and the driver and all that stuff to take care of those tasks. But I could have built an experience that was not solely focused on the taking.
Yes. And so a couple things just occurred to me. I was going to tell you about a friend of mine who does a lot of like tracking of her life. And so she always has metrics to back up anything that she tries. And she decided she was going to get rid of her car and only use Lyft or Uber or whatever. And she was guessing that it would save her $2,000 or $3,000 a year by her estimates. But she was nervous because she was like, well, what if it ends up costing me, you know, suddenly I have to pay every time I use my car. Right. And you don't know exactly how many times you've used your car and what the Lyft or Uber equivalent is. And you're just not sure. So it was a little bit of a nervous like, And so it actually ended up, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was an exorbitant amount of money counting, because you count everything, the car payment, the insurance, the gas, the parking.
It was exorbitant what she saved or what she
saved.
Oh, okay.
I think it was, for some reason, what's popping into my mind is like 8,000, 12,000. Like it was, it was whatever it was, I had that reaction. I was like, whoa. So it wasn't just like, I mean, even 2,000 would have been a lot, but that's what she was expecting. It was a ton of money. And so as I was thinking to tell you that story, I was like, yeah, but you know, she doesn't use her car for this, this, and this because she lives in this city. But also that gave me another idea, which is she has her groceries delivered. She uses Instacart because she travels a lot. So she's not always there. So she hasn't ordered. They can put the stuff in. They actually take it in her house. And so let's go back to where I said, well, what if your mom just loves driving? Well, maybe she hates grocery shopping. So you could say like, hey, if we do this, then we could add in this service. You won't have the car, so you don't have that expense. So there'll be money to take grocery shopping off your plate, or cleaning, or something else that she hates.
Right.
You're like, now we have funds for this. Or of course, something fun like a trip to New York.
No, but that's the point. I went in mission oriented to break the hard truth to her that she can't do this.
Yeah.
And as a result, this freedom, which she enjoyed, is now being taken.
Yeah.
Now, that was for a number of reasons that we discussed at the outset of the episode. It was a necessary outcome and a necessary conversation, but a wholly unnecessary approach.
Right.
You know, so just as she was looking at the car as the only vehicle, literal and figurative, to her freedom, I was looking at that one streamlined conversation as the only vehicle to the outcome that I knew had to happen.
Yeah.
And I did not look at it through her lens. Even though I was empathetic, I did understand, and I do understand where she's coming from. But I didn't put that empathy to work in terms of crafting an approach and crafting a strategy around that, so it's not about the can't and the taking.
Well, then I'm going to take this one level deeper on that, because I think that one places tougher conversations go awry is when you know, much like that thing they say, it's a funny metaphor to use given the story we started with, but how drunk drivers don't get hurt in accidents as badly as the people that they hit, because they're so loose.
Relaxed.
They're like, hey, whatever. Or maybe they're asleep or whatever. I mean, terrible metaphor, but you've been told, conditioned, reinforced for many years that this was going to be a tough conversation. There was no part of you that was like, hey, maybe it'll go well. Or not even that, but just like maybe there's a chance. Because I don't think anybody goes into that conversation thinking their parent is going to be like, yay.
There's a hope that the parent will
understand, at the least, just not like, swear to never forgive you and reconsider their love for you.
Yeah, that went wrong.
But that means, I would go back to them, that means you went into that conversation tightened up. Yep. You went in knowing this is going to be a fight. I am going to have to cut through like cartilage, like this is going to be.
I have to tell her this is what's going to happen. I know you're upset about it.
I have to sound definitive.
This is what's going to have to happen.
It can't sound like a question.
It's not, there's no wiggle. Well, let's see how it works out. And then you can come back because I couldn't tell her that it's going to get better because she's not going to start driving at 87. You know?
But why I think this is so important and why I wanted to spend just a minute or two here is, like, it is such a natural reaction for tough conversations to want to go in braced and ready and fierce and with a very tightly channeled way that you think the conversation can go. And there is so much value in, and it's scary. I get that it's scary, but so often I see the conversation go so much better when you can come to it with some empathy and curiosity. And I know if you said like, well, Mom, what do you think we should do? Like here's where we are. What are your thoughts? And just start there. Like I can feel that if that was my mom, I'd be like, oh, that's not going to work. And how do I back up to, nope, sorry, I already had an answer. That was like, I understand why it's a problem. But interestingly, that is where you can, I could make up, and I don't even know if this is the case, but I have seen circumstances happen where someone comes into a possibility of the conversation going like it did with the dad. Like somebody already had space to, once they get over the ego aspect and once they get over something, that there is a place in them that's actually excited. Because we're assuming that the minute he said like, hey, we're going to get you a driver, he's like, oh my God, this is the answer to all my prayers. I suspect there was some mourning and grief and, and some
there definitely
tough bits. And then he found the good in it.
I think that's definitely true. And I did come at it the way I fire people, because you don't, if you've made the tough decision and it's a tough decision to let somebody go, you don't go, I'm not sure that I can keep you on. What do you think?
I don't know.
Whatever.
Of course.
And so
there are places for like, here it is.
With the mentality of, I know this is hard, but this is the decision I made, and effective Friday.
Yeah. And we're totally Monday morning quarterbacking here. But I have seen so many situations where a person will, come in with, that there is actually that possibility, I think, where somebody might be able to find it in themselves, like his dad did, to be really happy about a thing. But because you come in and like smack them over the head with a 2x4 of this is the thing, then they tighten up and they're like, but I don't want that thing. And then that little space they could have climbed into that would have been like a good cozy version of it, they even forget it's there. So there is value, and it's so hard. We certainly can't say like, oh, here's where this works and here's where it doesn't. But I would love for it to more often be a consideration of going into a thing and, say, and maybe that's the line. There are things like firing somebody that cannot be an open-ended conversation. If it's not that, I think it's worth considering, exploring kind of what's there and how they feel about it and help them, guide them towards some other perspectives.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village,
Yes, it does.
we'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of
Lovingly
ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Including wrangling us.
Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.